guys, it's Slippery Jack and welcome back to another video. Today I am reviewing the new album by Biosphere, the Senja Recordings. Okay, so Biosphere is an ambient artist from Norway, and I personally consider him to be one of the greatest in ambient, period. I hold his music in very high regards. He does just like normal ambient, drone ambient, and also ambient house, which includes some beats. And if you have a hard time getting into ambient music, just check out like some of Biosphere's ambient house or techno albums like Cirque, Implants, and Microgravity. Or if you do like ambient, definitely listen to Substrata, which is what he is mostly known for and is by far my favorite, and is what I consider to be one of the greatest ambient albums of all time, and many people agree with me too. There's also some other records that he put out that didn't really get much attention. Pretty much anything after Implants didn't really catch on. There's also his this one album Shinzao, which is actually probably my second favorite by him. It's got like it's very eerie sounding, very dark, and with a lot of orchestral loops, and it creates like such a dreamy atmosphere that I can't help but love. It's very repetitive, but still highly enjoyable. Go check it out. There's my favorite that he's done this decade would have to probably be the Fijolhogget recordings, which he released last year. That album was very enjoyable front to back. All the melodies were very similar, but they were executed so well. They were mainly just like these big, beautiful, lush synth washes, but also some nature sounds too, or field recordings to balance that out so it wouldn't get boring. And it was only 38 minutes long, so I could listen to this album pretty much any time I felt like it. And that brings us here to the Senja Recordings. Senja, by the way, is Indonesian for twilight, which makes sense for this album. When I saw the cover, I thought the first thing that came to mind was dark ambient. So I thought, you know what? Biosphere doing dark ambient, that's gotta be cool, right? Well, it wasn't exactly what I hoped for, and me being a big Biosphere fan, I had very high expectations for this. So what did we get? It was no Substrata or Shinzao, I'll tell you that. It wasn't even Fijolhogget recordings. In fact, this is probably the weakest album Biosphere has done to date. But that doesn't mean that there's no enjoyment in this album at all, nothing to get out of it. I just feel like some tracks just didn't do much for me. The first half of it, like from by the way guys, I'm not Norwegian, so don't get on me for these mispronunciations. But Skaalbrekka is just like 3 minutes of these noises with some wind and rain sounds. Yeah, it doesn't do much for me, but I guess I can take it. I never skip over it. Strandby has kind of a melody, but very abstract. It's pretty good. Bergsbotn 1 is just a straight drone ambient track. Nothing wrong with that. And there's some other stuff on here that it didn't really do as much for me, but it was still enjoyable. In fact, tracks 1 through 7 was the best part of this album. But after the spacey Fijolhogget everything else just kind of lost me. Bergsbotn 2 was alright though, but Bergsbotn 3, I like how it tries to create an atmosphere, and it's one of the better tracks I'd say on this album, but not as good as anything from the first 7. It's got like these effects on some percussion, and it's interesting, but it goes on a little too long for its own good. And then after that, Lysbotn is pretty much just does nothing for me. Most of the tracks on this second half are just one noise, and it's drone ambient, and I can get drone ambient, but like, still, compared to the drone ambient and the dark ambient that I've heard, this is quite uninteresting. I remember on the album The Tired Sounds of Stars of the Lid, there was a track on there called Austin, Texas Mental Hospital, and that track went on for, the second part of that track was just one chord for 10 minutes, and after about 5 minutes in, I got tired of it and had to skip it because my ears just couldn't take it. But for that first 5 minutes, I quite enjoyed it because there was more sounds in it. It was more interesting, if you know what I mean. These tracks, there's nothing interesting about them, but that doesn't mean that there's nothing on the second half. There's Gilbert, which was probably the best drone track on this half, and luckily the album ends on a good note, which is Ha, I guess, which goes on for 8 minutes, similar to Berg, with some similar dark melodies, but I think this is actually probably my favorite track on the album. I love like the weird sounds at the beginning, and yeah, it just kind of ends on a more interesting note. The thing I love about dark ambient is that it's a lot more it's very interesting and adventurous, and this track shows why. But overall, the Senja Recordings is not consistent. This has to be one of the biggest disappointments for me in ambient music altogether. I'm really sorry. I'm not going to get my hopes up because it could grow on me, but especially when it's in the same genre as albums like Selected Ambient Works Volume 2, Ambient 4 on Land, and other albums like that. And also by the same guy who wrote Freaking Substrata. There's just no competition here. But yeah, overall, my favorite tracks, I would say Berg, Ha, Fijolhogget, Bergsbotn 1, Strandby. Least favorite, how about Storjupta or Lysbotn, depending on my mood. This album is a 65 out of 100. I'm sorry. But these are just my opinions. Go check the album out for yourself. I know that my musical tastes are very strange, so I'm sure a lot of people are enjoying this album a lot more than I am. And it could grow on me and make my decade list later on, but right now, I'm just not feeling it. But thank you very much for watching. Like and subscribe for more entertainment, and I will see you all in the next video. Peace out.